Ladyfingers are part cake and part cookie, and a handy tool in a pastry kitchen. I'll start by showing you a basic ladyfinger recipe, then dip those ladyfingers into chocolate. After that, you'll be ready to take on the challenge of a popular and classic dessert, tiramisu. Then we'll advance into another use of ladyfingers, an elegant raspberry lemon mousse torte. And for a little something different, I'll transform the ladyfinger recipe into coconut almond madeleines. Ladyfingers are made from a sponge cake recipe, but they're baked up in individual cookies, so they really are that 50-50 blend, part cake, part cookie. I'll start by sifting some flour, half a cup of all-purpose flour, and then a key ingredient to achieve the right texture in a ladyfinger biscuit is to add 5 tablespoons of cornstarch. The cornstarch keeps the ladyfingers soft in the center and also makes them such a fine, delicate texture. I'll just sift that together. Sometimes a sponge cake recipe calls for whole eggs whipped together. In the case of the ladyfinger sponge, for the delicate air bubbles, I separate the eggs. 3 eggs at room temperature. And I'm going to whip the whites first. I'll whip the whites, adding 6 tablespoons of sugar gradually as I increase the speed. With that amount of sugar added to the whites, you'll find that your whipped whites are thick and glossy. That means you've got nice, beautiful, tiny air bubbles in there. So I've got a nice medium peak to the whites, but I'm going to use the same beaters and whip my yolks with an additional 3 tablespoons of sugar. You don't have to wait until you're whipping them. You can add them right at the beginning. Here's a little tip to tell when your yolks or whole eggs are whipped to the right volume. When you lift your beaters and paint a number 8 on top, if you see the full number 8, you know you've hit the right volume. If the number 8 disappears into the eggs too quickly, just put it back on the mixer to let it go for another minute or 2. The whites I'll add to the yolks all in one addition, because both are nice and light and fluffy, so they'll incorporate quickly and easily. And I switch to a spatula when I'm ready to add the flour and the cornstarch, all at once. Fold, lifting from the bottom. You'll notice I'm not adding any extra flavors, lemon zest or vanilla. I want the ladyfingers to be rather neutral, because sometimes you use them in other desserts. In this case, I'm simply going to dip them in chocolate, so it's about appreciating the simplicity and the texture of the ladyfingers. I've got my piping bag fitted with a plain tip and a parchment-lined baking tray. This makes about 3 dozen ladyfinger biscuits. And I simply pipe a finger about 4 inches long. A little tip as you're piping your fingers is to hold the piping bag tip about 1/2 inch above where you're piping, but then right at the end, when you want to stop piping, just touch the tip on the bottom of the tray and lift up, and it gives you a nice clean finish to your ladyfinger. And there we go. And you can see just after piping that the ladyfinger batter starts settling a little bit. And once it hits the heat of the oven, it rises up, but also out a little bit. You're baking a cake essentially, but without a cake pan. So it's expected to spread a little bit. These are ready for the oven. I've preheated it to 400 degrees. And because of that hot oven, they only take 8 to 10 minutes. You definitely want to let ladyfingers cool on the baking tray. I have a tray here that's cooled down, and it naturally happens a little bit. As they cool, they just kind of curl up ever so slightly at the edges. And the reason you want to cool them on the tray is because they're easier to peel off the parchment once they're cooled. What I have here is just 4 ounces of bittersweet chocolate that's been melted. And then just to dip the end, or you can dip both ends in the ladyfinger, is a great way to just add that little accent. And I like to dip both ends of the ladyfinger in the chocolate on a bit of an angle, so it has a little polish. All of a sudden, a simple ladyfinger biscuit becomes a treat all on its own. Now that you're comfortable with making your own ladyfingers, how about using them in a classic dessert, tiramisu?